You are on African soil, not for the first time, but this would be a good moment to ask about one of the countries that has taken its own autonomy, and that's Burkina Faso. Yeah. Your remarks recently at the Senate seem to suggest that he's diverting, General Traoré, is diverting its 4 billion gold reserves to sustain his military rule rather than for public welfare. These remarks sparked widespread condemnation across the continent. What did you mean by that statement?
Let me speak to Burkina Faso's sovereignty. They maintain their sovereignty. They make their decisions how they use their resources. They make their decisions who their resources go to for military support. That's their sovereign right. But my cautionary tale was just from a military perspective. That was a Senate Armed Services Committee asking me a direct question. Burkina Faso, a lot of great things going on to progress them forward, okay? But then when you look at the military part of it, knowing that that's the epicenter of global terrorism, it was my time to illuminate that this is probably their weakest point, and there needs to be sufficient resources going towards for the whole fight of terrorism in that country, period. They make their decisions though. That's their sovereignty, their sovereign right to make their decisions, what is appropriate, what's not. But I wanted to illuminate that is going in the wrong direction now. ISIS is getting stronger. JNIM is getting stronger. Al-Qaeda in the lands of the Maghreb is getting stronger in that country.
And do you think it's getting stronger after General Traoré took over?
It has. Just look at the numbers of attacks. It really has, since 2022. I've been tracking this since I took command. So, no ill will towards him, but the decisions is their own. They're looking for other ways to be able to, they're still on warfighting footing, but it's just going to take more resources.
So you stand by that statement? Because there's been pressure on you to walk those statements back.
That's my statement, that's my assessment. That is getting worse. More needs to be done for not just local, but whole of country, because of these violent extremist organizations are seeking revenue, they're seeking resources, they're seeking recruiting from the Burkinabe people, and they're seeking refuge within their country. That threatens their sovereignty.
And that threatens America's interest?
Say again?
Does that then threaten America's interests?
Yes, thank you for asking that. Because especially ISIS, and of course in East Africa is inextricably linked all the way to ISIS West Africa, ISIS Sahel, and there's going to be probably a move afoot for them to move and seek refuge within the line. So we have shared objectives, and we offer to work together with the Burkinabe government and border countries. Mali, Niger, coastal West Africa countries, collective, because here's what these organizations do. Here's what these terrorist organizations do. They seek refuge in the seams or the borders of these countries and lets them thrive and grow and lets them recruit, gain resources to carry on their illicit and nefarious activities against the populations of those people.
And what would America, perhaps AFRICOM, be prepared to do? Would you be considering an ouster like we saw with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya? Because there's still many Africans who are yet to recover from that. If this is a bigger threat, as you say, in Burkina Faso, what is AFRICOM prepared to do about it?
We do indications and warnings. There's a number of activities that we do, and we'll just go ahead and mention building institutional capacity. There's not going to be U.S. boots on the ground. Very, very small for exchange of ideas and training, exercises. Over time, that builds institutional capacity and capability in these armories. There, AFRICOM, we are working towards a burden sharing and a burden shift for their independent operations. That's our goal. We have the shared objectives because these same terrorist groups can threaten our homeland. So we're in concert. I was just an African Lion over in Morocco. A number of countries working together to be able to address.
Is Burkina Faso invited here today for this conference?
Yes.
The audacity of empire never ceases to amaze. On May 27, 2025, General Michael Langley, the commander of the United States Africa Command, AFRICOM, sat down with Kenya's Citizen TV in Nairobi to defend his earlier slander against Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Langley's attempt to walk back his inflammatory remarks, made during a U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on April 3, 2025, only deepens the wound of Western hypocrisy. His accusations that Traoré misused Burkina Faso's gold reserves to protect his junta, rather than benefit the nation's 23 million citizens, sparked a firestorm of outrage across Africa. Now, after Africans rose in unison to defend their son, Traoré, Langley's feeble attempt to spin his narrative as a military perspective reeks of desperation. This is not just a story about one general's backpedaling, it's a glaring expose of the West's age-old playbook of destabilizing Africa to maintain its chokehold on the continent's resources and sovereignty. But this time, with revolutionary leaders like Traoré at the helm and a united African consciousness awakening, the West is finding its schemes faltering. Let's rewind to April 3, 2025. In the hallowed halls of the U.S. Senate, General Langley, the first black four-star general in the U.S. Marine Corps, and AFRICOM's sixth commander, stood before the Senate Armed Services Committee. Responding to a question from Senator Roger Wicker about corruption linked to Chinese trade, Langley zeroed in on Burkina Faso's young leader. "Absolutely, Chairman, I see this and I don't mind calling it out," he declared with the arrogance of a colonial overseer. "Captain Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, their gold reserves are just in exchange to protect the junta regime." The words landed like a grenade across Africa. From Ouagadougou to Nairobi, from Lagos to Accra, the African continent erupted in righteous indignation. Social media platforms, X, TikTok, Instagram, became battlegrounds where Africans and the diaspora unleashed their fury. On X, posts decried Langley's remarks as a textbook case of Western interference, with one user framing it as "defenders of sovereignty branded as threats, the hypocrisy of General Langley's words on Burkina Faso." Another post thundered, "America is after Ibrahim Traoré to eliminate him just like they killed Gaddafi. If America touches Traoré, the AU must consider it a declaration of war against Africa." Protests erupted outside US embassies, with demonstrators in London and Ouagadougou waving placards reading, "Hands off Ibrahim Traoré," and "No silence, no surrender." The Burkinabe government, led by the 36-year-old Traoré, the world's youngest head of state, swiftly condemned Langley's remarks as regrettable and gravely inaccurate. In a fiery response, Traoré declared, "We must choose to fight or we will remain slaves forever," invoking Burkina Faso's painful colonial history under French rule and his government's unyielding commitment to sovereignty. The Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, in South Africa echoed this sentiment, denouncing Langley's claims as a blatant imperialist tactic aimed at destabilizing a sovereign African state. The Alliance of Sahel States, AES, comprising Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, issued a joint statement slamming the US for its neo-colonial rhetoric and reaffirming their resolve to protect their resources and independence. Africans were not just angry, they were wounded. Langley's accusation wasn't merely a critique of Traoré's leadership, it was an assault on the aspirations of a continent striving to break free from centuries of exploitation. For decades, Western powers have plundered Africa's gold, diamonds, and oil, leaving its people in poverty while foreign corporations grew fat. Now, when a leader like Traoré dares to reclaim Burkina Faso's $4 billion gold reserves for his people, the West cries foul. The hypocrisy is staggering. Fast forward to May 27, 2025, and General Langley, perhaps sensing the heat of Africa's unified resistance, attempted to douse the flames in an interview with Citizen TV in Nairobi. Speaking ahead of a conference of African chiefs of defense forces, he claimed his earlier remarks were misconstrued. "Let me speak to Burkina Faso's sovereignty," he said, his tone dripping with calculated diplomacy. "They maintain their sovereignty and make their decisions on how they use their resources. That's their sovereign right. But my cautionary tale was just from a military perspective. This sudden deference to Burkina Faso's sovereignty is laughable." Langley's original accusation was not a neutral, military perspective, but a deliberate smear, designed to paint Traoré as a corrupt dictator to justify Western intervention. Now, faced with a continent-wide backlash, he pivots to platitudes about sovereignty while doubling down on his claim that Burkina Faso's military is its weakest link in the fight against terrorism. Burkina Faso, a lot of great things are going on to progress them forward, he conceded, before adding, "But when you look at the military part of it, knowing that that's the epicenter of global terrorism, it was my time to illuminate that this is probably their weakest point." Langley's attempt to reframe his narrative is a classic Western tactic. Vilify first, then backtrack with feigned respect when the target proves resilient. His insistence that Burkina Faso is the epicenter of global terrorism is a convenient pretext, echoing the same Taiji justifications used to invade Iraq in 2003 or destabilize Libya in 2011. The US claims to be a partner in counter-terrorism, yet AFRICOM's presence in the Sahel has coincided with a surge in jihadist violence since 2015, with groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS gaining ground. If anything, Langley's remarks expose AFRICOM's failure to deliver on its lofty mission to promote regional security, stability, and prosperity. Langley's accusations and subsequent backtrack are not isolated incidents but part of a well-worn Western playbook to maintain dominance over Africa. Step 1. Demonize any African leader who dares to prioritize national interests over Western demands. Step 2. Amplify these accusations through media propaganda to justify sanctions, covert operations, or military intervention. Step 3. Install pliable puppets to ensure resources flow back to Western capitals. We've seen this script play out time and again. Patrice Lumumba in Congo, Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Each was branded a threat for daring to dream of African sovereignty, only to be toppled by Western machinations. Traoré's crime is clear. He's refusing to play by the West's rules. Since seizing power in a 2022 coup, he has expelled French troops, nationalized gold mines like Essakane, and banned raw gold exports to ensure local processing. He's built Burkina Faso's first gold refinery, renegotiated mining contracts to favor local participation, and invested in agriculture and cotton processing to reduce reliance on raw material exports. These are not the actions of a self-serving dictator, but a revolutionary leader committed to economic sovereignty. Yet, the West, through Langley, paints him as a villain, accusing him of hoarding gold for personal gain, a baseless claim unsupported by any public evidence. The timing of Langley's remarks raises suspicions. Just days after his Senate testimony, Burkina Faso's Security Minister Mahamadou Sana revealed that security forces had foiled a major plot to assassinate Traoré, allegedly orchestrated from neighboring Ivory Coast, a known haven for Western-backed exiles like Blaise Compaoré, who assassinated Sankara in 1987. Langley's visit to Ivory Coast for AFRICOM's Operation Flintlock, hosted by President Alassane Ouattara, a staunch US and French ally, only fuels speculation of coordinated efforts to destabilize Traoré's regime. As one protester in London put it, "This is regime change by any means." Captain Ibrahim Traoré is not just a leader, he is a symbol of Africa's awakening. At 36, he embodies the spirit of Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary icon, whose 1987 assassination was orchestrated with Western complicity. Traoré's anti-imperialist stance, his expulsion of French troops, and his alignment with Mali and Niger in the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, have sent shockwaves through Western capitals. His vision of African unity and self-reliance threatens the very foundation of neo-colonialism, which thrives on division and dependency. The AES, formed in 2023, is a bold declaration of independence. By expelling French forces and deepening ties with Russia, China and Turkey, Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger are rewriting the rules of engagement in the Sahel. Traoré's popularity among young Africans stems from his unapologetic rejection of Western interference and his commitment to restoring sovereignty and pride to his people. As journalist Sidiq Abba notes, his anti-imperialist stance resonates with young Africans tired of the old system, whereby African countries take orders from former colonial powers. The West's fear is palpable. Traoré's moves, nationalizing gold, building refineries and forging new alliances, threaten their access to Africa's wealth. Burkina Faso's gold reserves, valued at $4 billion, are no longer flowing unchecked to Western vaults. Instead, they're funding infrastructure, agriculture, and security, lifting Burkina Faso out of the imperialist extractive economy trap. This is why Langley's accusations came when they did. Traoré is giving the West nightmares, and they're desperate to stop him before his vision spreads. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of this saga is the West's use of General Langley, a black American, to undermine Traoré, a black African leader. This is no accident. The West has long deployed black figures to carry out its bidding against African interests, cloaking its imperialism in a veneer of racial solidarity. From the Buffalo Soldiers, who aided white settlers in displacing Native Americans, to modern-day black diplomats and military officials, the US has a history of using skinfolk who aren't kinfolk to advance its agenda. As one ex-post scathingly put it, General Michael Langley, a House Negro, accused Traoré of looting Burkina Faso's gold reserves. Langley's role as AFRICOM's commander places him at the heart of this contradiction. As the first black four-star general in the Marine Corps, he is a symbol of achievement within the US system. Yet, his accusations against Traoré align him with the same imperialist forces that have exploited Africa for centuries. His claim that Traoré's military is the weakest link in the fight against terrorism ignores the fact that Burkina Faso's armed forces, under Traoré, have reclaimed territory from jihadists, bolstered by new equipment from Russia, China and Turkey. Meanwhile, AFRICOM's $65 million in aid has done little to curb insecurity, with critics arguing it fuels chaos to justify Western presence. This tactic, using black faces to undermine black leaders, is as old as colonialism itself. When Patrice Lumumba was assassinated in 1961, Western intelligence agencies worked through African intermediaries. When Sankara was killed, his betrayer, Blaise Compaoré, was backed by France. Now, Langley's words serve the same purpose: to delegitimize Traoré and pave the way for intervention, all while hiding behind the facade of a black general's concern for Africa. The West's desperation is evident in its failure to adapt to Africa's new reality. After being expelled from the Sahel, French troops kicked out of Burkina Faso in 2023, Mali in 2022, and Niger in 2023, the US is scrambling to regain its foothold. Langley's visit to Ivory Coast, a Western stronghold, and plans to establish a US military base in coastal West Africa signal a refusal to accept defeat. But this time, they're up against a different Africa, one led by fearless young leaders like Traoré, Assimi Goïta in Mali, and Abdourahmane Tiani in Niger, who prioritize sovereignty over submission. Africa doesn't need the West. For too long, Western aid has come with strings attached, debt traps, resource theft, and military occupation disguised as partnership. AFRICOM, established in 2007, claims to promote stability, but its track record tells a different story: increased terrorism, destabilized governments, and protected corporate interests. Meanwhile, Traoré's Burkina Faso is modernizing its military, building infrastructure, and empowering farmers, all without Western handouts. Mali and Niger are following suit, with the AES exploring a joint central bank and currency to break free from the French-controlled CFA franc. If Africa unites, the possibilities are limitless. Imagine a continent with a unified military force, pooling the resources of 54 nations to create one of the world's strongest defense systems. With leaders like Traoré leading the charge, Africa could protect its borders, resources, and people without relying on foreign powers who view the continent as a chessboard for their geopolitical games. The AES is a step in this direction, a beacon of hope for a self-reliant Africa. As Traoré said at a 2024 summit, "We are victims of our wealth which the imperialists want to take back at any cost to keep us in slavery." Langley's backtrack is a victory for African resistance. The fight is far from over. The West will not relinquish its grip on Africa without a struggle. The foiled coup plot against Traoré, the smear campaigns, and AFRICOM's persistent meddling are all signs of their desperation. But Africa is waking up.